It's called Camtasia. Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. So what I eventually want to do is I want to stream it live on YouTube because I really think it's kind of fun to be able to I can just dump it directly onto YouTube through here. The Wi-Fi has been upgraded on campus, so we're getting about 180 megabits per second upload speeds. So it's fast. Yeah, it's plenty, and even if everybody else is looking at Snapchat, you're still fine. So, you guys are too old for Snapchat still, or is that still? Okay, my daughter needs to leave her phone away when she's studying now because she's like, it's so like constant. Like she'll like write 2 words down, zzz, write 2 words down, zzz. Well, tell all her stupid friends, like, I keep my story going. Lock it in a drawer. Okay, so what is this? What is the brain all about? Okay, so it's electro. What's the other word? Come on. Does the brain just work on electricity? How do I change your mind without zapping you? All right, class experiment. Everybody take a tab of ecstasy. Let's go into, oh, wait, that's get fired number 2. What happens if I give everybody ecstasy, aside from a few people having nervous breakdowns? Does it change the way you think? Why? Yeah. So the brain is an electrochemical machine. It's an electrochemical machine. So sadly, the first 3 weeks of this class, we're going to explain that electrochemical thing. That's all we're doing for the next 3 weeks. And it gets kind of tedious because electro is easy, electrical potentials, but the chemicals are complicated. And there is, yay, a periodic table here. I asked for one, I didn't see it when I walked in, because it's obviously right there. But that's chemistry right there. Our brain uses this chart to produce everything that we know, and everything that we are, and everything that it is. It's based on the chemicals in that chart. And it's interesting because we're these biological organisms that create energy and create electricity. And no, giant computers aren't using that energy to feed the future. That's the Matrix. We don't play that game. Okay? But, so, what is this thing called the mind then? Is the mind the same thing as brain? Okay, so I'm going to write this up here. There's monists and dualists. And then there's spiritualists and realists and materialists, but we'll ignore those. So a monist versus a dualist. A monist says mind equals brain. What does a dualist say? Well, no, mind and brain are 2 things. So this is old philosophy crap, that in old school, the mind is the brain. The dualists came along and said, no, the mind exists outside of the brain. Where do people say their mind or their soul is? So when someone talks about their soul, where do they point? Their chest, right here. Why do you put your soul here? Yeah, it's where your heart is. Because it's really cool that if you damage your heart, you don't live very long. You get something stabbed in your head, you pull it out, you have an infection, but can you still live? Yes. Because your brain, even though it can be damaged, can your mind compensate for brain damage? Yes. You can learn how to be a self again after brain damage. It's not easy, it takes a lot of time, and your self might change, But your self can still be a functioning self even though you've had some brain damage. But it's really interesting that the dualist principle we reject in this class. We're all about the monist. But why is the dualist important? Why is the dualist important to pay attention to and not forget? Oh, come on. Day one. Should we just project the fact that we have a mind and just study the brain? Move on? Like behaviorism? It'd be so awesome. There's no mind. Well, yeah, a lot of the monists believe that the mind and the brain are the same. Are they? What does that mean? It's hard to tell. Okay, so can we measure brain? I have a machine in my office. We're going to plug one of you in, and we're going to watch you on the screen. Okay, it's cool. It's getting a little crusty right now, though. I need to clean it. That's Luis's first job this semester. Toothbrush, baking soda, clean the brain scanner. But I can measure your brain. Can I measure your mind? But I'm measuring your answers, not the mind. So the reason why this is a nice school of psychology to follow, the school that we're in right now, which is physiopsych, the biology of the brain, is because we reject the notion of the fact that the mind exists outside of the brain. So the more we understand the brain, eventually what should we understand? This idea of the mind. What is psychology? Yeah, so psychology is the study of the mind. And if psychology is the study of the mind, this class, we call it physiopsych because what are we studying? The physiology of the mind. How the mind works in our brain. The problem is we have to go through this stupid electrochemical machine for a couple weeks before we can even understand how it basically works, before we can even get close to mind. We really don't get close to mind until week 12, week 13. Sorry. But what about this? It's exciting. Sorry, no, we can't talk about that yet. No, what about this? It's so cool. What? I got a bad breakup with my significant other. Why do I feel sad? Chapter 14. Just wait. We'll get there, but just wait. So, what are the other schools of psych? Just a little review. What are some other schools of psych? Okay, so developmental psychology is an applied psychology. It's not a study. It's taking all the schools of psychology and applying it to something else. Social psychology is another applied psychology. It's taking all the rules of psychology, especially cognitive, and applying them to a social situation. A human sexuality, but sadly, that class back in the 90s, the 70s, all the way through the 90s was great. We had 2 or 3 sections. It was a really fun class, but now we don't offer it anymore. Because one of the biggest topics we used to have was a discussion about gender and transgender, and now? That's taboo. No, it's not taboo at all anymore. People don't care. Yeah. You're transgender. Okay. That's it. That's the giant argument. It's like, oh. It's ever changing. It's just not something that people are fascinated by and can't talk about in public anymore. So it's the same thing about sex. A lot of the sex stuff that we used to talk about, people are like, nowadays you just Google. Click. Okay, not in the library again. Okay, but there's no the mystery stuff isn't there. We really need to have a relationships class because that's really lacking in younger people's generations, but whatever. Okay, we just swipe left or right. What's the difference? Okay, so there's a behavioral school of psychology. What do they study? Behavior. Study of behavior. It's a great school of psych. It's super simple. It's real. There's cognitive psychology. Next semester, we'll be offering our first class in cognitive psych on campus. It's very boring. No, it's exciting. We're finished writing it right now. Grossmont, I don't know if they're offering it this semester or not, but I sent the outline over to them. They took Palomar's outline and pushed it through their curriculum and then sent it to me. So I'm going to steal the one that they wrote and put it for us. Just keep it the same. Okay. Thank you, Amy at Grossmont. Anyway, so cognitive psychology is a way of studying the brain or studying the mind by looking at your thoughts. Behavioral school is looking at your behavior. So physio is looking at your brain. That's what this class is. What are some other schools? Come on. Okay, so clinical psychology is clinical's applied. I'm going to write developmental down here. These are all applied areas of psych. So clinical, developmental, social, abnormal, personality, all the really cool stuff that you get to in the second half of the semester in intro, that's all applied psychology. So what are some of the other things that we talk about in basic intro? We can talk about Freud. Psychoanalytic or psychodynamic. I'm just going to write Freud here. Yeah. Okay, so evolution, yeah. Okay, there's one other one that's really important that before we talk about evolution, I'm going to put Airy because that's how you're supposed to, evolutionary psych. Yeah. So it's humanistic. Anybody remember what the humanistic school of psychology studies? Yeah. This annoying thing called self and the power that you have to control your destiny, whatever. In physio, yourself is in your posterior parietal lobe. We anesthetize it, you have a dissociative event. Self, explain, right here. It's right next to neurons for people that you care about when they hurt themselves. Guess what happens to you? You feel the pain. Because you're associated yourself with the other person so much that you feel how the other person's feeling. When you get depressed, you detach from that and feel separated from other people. Post-traumatic stress disorder, you detach from that, you suppress. So in the brain, we love talking about the self. Yeah. Freud. Yeah. Okay, so it's Sigmund Freud. What's the psychodynamic about? I just write Freud without putting any more words on it. Yeah. Yeah, it's how your unconscious past affects your future. In my intro class, I always draw a little wheelie suitcase that we all carry with us, and there's some junk down at the bottom of that little wheelie suitcase that you're dragging along with you. Is that going to fall out of your suitcase at some point in your life? Yeah, and the deeper that pile of junk at the bottom of your little wheelie suitcase, we call it baggage. The deeper the stuff that's packed in there, the more it affects you as you go through your life. And this is what a therapist does. A therapist jumps right in there and look at this, and you're like, no, and they're like, yeah, look at this, oh, and this too, and you're like, that's why. Why did you think you stuffed it there to begin with? Yeah, because you had to hide it to begin with because you didn't want to deal with it. And it turns out that a lot of clinical psych uses Freudian crap, even though Freud was cray-cray, scientific term. Freud was really far out there. He was extremely brilliant and very good at analyzing patients and digging into their past to figure out what's causing their future behavior. It's not really good science, but it does really help with clinical. It helps with social, developmental, it helps with social, it helps with abnormal. Almost all psychiatric disorders, there is some sort of childhood trauma associated with psychiatric disorder. It doesn't mean that childhood trauma causes psychiatric disorders, but when you look at someone who has a disorder, a lot of the people who have suffered from childhood trauma. It's interesting. And it definitely affects personality. So evolutionary psych talks, what does that talk about? Well, but what is Just restating the word.
Right.
Behaviorism, it works, but evolutionary doesn't.
Yes.
Do you have family traits? Yeah, my mom's side of the family are the Schulers. What German Schuler means? Schooler. Teachers. My mom's side of the family are all teachers. And it's really funny because the whole family was either preachers or teachers all back in Germany forever. And then, so I teach. My dad's side of the family is for Weinerts von Wienerfelds. They're Weinerts in the vineyards in southern Estonia. So we're a bunch of alcoholics. Hey, my dad died from alcoholism. My brother suffers from it. If I have a beer, my stomach bloats out. Stupid liver. I'm what, almost 50? If I keep drinking, what happens? I don't drink very much, but if I drank a lot, what would happen? I'd get that big heart attack tummy that you see those guys have with the. Have anybody watched the Grand Tour, the new Top Gear? Jeremy, the big tall guy, has this big, looks like he's pregnant. That's from alcohol, and that's from your liver not processing the alcohol, and it distends. And that's all fluid pressure inside your guts. If you touch it, it's hard. Like, dunk, dunk, dunk. What's that doing to the rest of your insides? Nothing good. It's putting a lot of pressure on your heart and everything else. That's why it's called a heart attack tummy. So if you have a drink and your stomach goes, try recreational cannabis. It's legalish, as long as you're not working for a federal job. Okay, moving on. So, I said that on TV. Moving on. Okay. So if you think about these basic schools of psych, evolutionary psych, going back, personality. Genetically, my family has genetic traits. Are they passed on through our genes? Yes. We make jokes about masculine and feminine behavior, but if you happen to have testosterone in your system, you have more masculine behavior. If you're female and have high testosterone, people call you a tomboy. You act masculine, you stomp around. If you're male and you have lower testosterone, you tend to act more feminine. Okay, and that is just the nature of evolutionary psych. Is evolutionary psych a cause and effect kind of school of psychology? Is it based on cause and effect? You're male, therefore you will? No, it's an influence. It's not cause and effect, it's influence. Part of evolutionary psych is called cultural psychology, which is really fascinating. If you look at, we really want to start the cultural psych course again, because the different cultures have different ways of thinking. Yeah, and it's really cool to see how the language of a particular culture, the way that they use words, changes the way that they think about global situations, about everything, by the way that they talk about it. In a lot of cultures where there's a lot of sexism, they also have masculine and feminine nouns, increasing the difference between male and female things. There's more sexism because they think of things as male or female. In cultures like America, what's happening with sexism and gender roles? They're not flipped, they're just blending. And I can be a good mom at home and be a good dad at the same time. I had a good mom morning. I was epic. All my lunches were made, everything was done, and I had time to sit and stretch with my wife after her run. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Whew. So, why do we need to study the brain? Who cares? A lot of people say that the second week. But who cares? Why do you need to know this? Not sure why the speech people need to know this. Do you have to take a physical science? Is that what it is? I know, so I think it's this counts as your physical science. So as opposed to taking astronomy or taking anthropology, you can take this. Physical anthro or cultural anthro? Anyway, sorry. Oh, stats. Yay. Okay. Sorry. Scheduling fun. Who cares? Why do you need to know this? if you could do that, that would be amazing. But in fact, if we go down to, if we look at behavioral psychology, could we understand why people do what they do better than by studying the brain? Behavioral psychology study behavior. So if you study behavior and study the environment, you can figure out why people do what they do without ever looking at their brain. If I understand your thoughts, cognitive psychology is about the study of attention and memory and sensation and perception and all these things that happen, but we don't really know that they're happening, but we know that they're happening because we know they're happening. So can you count to 10 in your head? How do you know what number you're on? You're thinking about it. How do we know you're correct? Well, you can stop and tell me what number you're on. Count backwards by 7 from 100. Go. No. Requires way too much concentration and effort. Okay? Well, it's funny because can you do that if you concentrate? How do I know you're doing it right? You can say it. You can use language. You can actually say the numbers out loud, and if you're thinking correctly, you can actually do it. Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M. Okay. Okay. Drunk practice. So now, the idea of cognitive psychology is great, but is it real? It explains the way that you're doing things just as well as understanding the brain. Yeah. Good. Okay, a lot of the brain research, costs a grip ton of money in order to do brain research. Just a cool little brain scanner that we have, which it's really not research grade, it's not high enough resolution to do any real research with, other than play. But that one I have in my office is almost 10 years old, and it cost around $800 about 10 years ago. They have new 7-channel ones, which are smaller, and they don't require all the you used to put saline on this one to make sure it connects to your head, and it's kind of a pain. But the new ones that I'm going to write a grant for this semester to get have these little rubber electrodes that actually just connect to your skull without having to put saline in your hair, gel in your hair, or anything else. They're really cool. But it costs a lot of money to do real research. If you wanted to buy the real research grade version of that, it's $1,500 just to buy the cap, and then the software is $100 a month to use the software. And you can't buy the software. You have to use the software on the server, which costs $100 a month to have access to. I mean, just to have SPSS, it's $2,500 a semester to have SPSS. No, $25,000 for the semester for the campus to have it. It's really expensive. So it costs a lot of money, but you also get a lot of money doing brain research. One of the best ways to get a grant is to use the word brain in your grant. Put a picture of the brain on your grant, and you're more likely to get funded. There's a TED Talk called Neurobunk, which this lady basically did an analysis of all the people that talked about the brain in their research, and that they were about 3 or 4 times more likely to be funded if they mentioned a part of the brain in their proposal. When I told my research methods students that one semester, guess what they all put on their final projects? A little picture of the brain. Very important. Okay. Again, who cares? Why do you need to know this? You're a social work major. Why do you need to know this? Yeah, okay, that doesn't really go very far. But it's cool. Yeah. So you guys are at a loss. You're taking this class, you don't even know why. Okay. There. Checkbox. Okay, can I tell them about your brain? Them?
Yeah, I don't care.
Okay. William has epilepsy. Do we care about the brain?
I'm broken.
Well, you're not broken. It's not working right. So hopefully he won't have a seizure this semester. But we know what to do if he does. But so he never did have a seizure in my stats course, so we're positive energy. So do we need to know about the brain if we know about his brain? We're going to plug him into the brain scanner and see if we can see a seizure. We'll flash some lights at him. Don't tell his parents. Okay, now, no, I was kidding. That's a way to get fired really close to the ecstasy experiment. Okay, if you do it at the same time, no, okay, stop. Okay, so, but if we, does he care about studying the brain? Because what causes epilepsy is an electrochemical problem. Okay, and the electrochemical problem is that one of the cells starts going, and then one next to it starts going, and then they all start going. And for a while, whatever, last semester you had what, 4 or 5 seizures in a week? That week when you had the seizure in that one class?
I only had one. And
But you had a bunch of the little ones though.
no, that's just all the time.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's all
So
the time.
he had a major seizure in one of the classes. It was pretty serious. And what happens is that the seizures spread. And as they spread, they change the electrical chemical signals, and he loses consciousness. And it's interesting in the fact that who cares about the brain? Well, his disorder is a disorder of the electrical chemical signals in his brain. Did anybody get migraines in here? That's electrochemical signals in the brain. And all it is it's changing in blood flow. And you can generally feel them once you get good at having them. You can feel like an hour before it happens. Oh, crap. You get up in the morning and you're like one side's a little tingly. Crap. Do you get visual auras or do you get a taste? Or?
I get tunnel vision and then sometimes my hand goes.
Yeah, so that's the nerves in the bottom of your neck change your blood pressure. And when they change your blood pressure, it constricts or dilates blood vessels, depending on what type of, and most sounds like you're constricting, and that's why your hand goes tingly. My wife, for a long time when she was younger, if she drank like half a beer, she'd get a migraine. She drank the whole beer, or 2 beers, no migraine. But half a beer, she'd get a migraine. It's like her brain is waiting for the alcohol but doesn't get it, so it overcompensates and causes a migraine. Practice drinking more, it's the moral of the story. Now, but I took a St. John's wort once. I just wanted to see, does it actually do anything? Turns out it does. And I got so sick after taking that, just one of those things, and I got the best migraine I've ever had in my entire life. Both sides of my forehead just... So be careful taking over-the-counter medications because are some of them real? Yeah. I took a melatonin one once too. In the bathroom for like an hour. Good for digestion. Some people are sensitive different ways. Okay, so, but the idea of when you try to study the brain, there's a lot of things that your brain does. I have bad attention span. So what do I generally drink a lot of? Caffeine. Yesterday I drank too much caffeine and I had to pee like every 15 minutes. So I'm cutting my caffeine down a little bit today. But it's interesting because is caffeine your brain? Yeah. Caffeine's your brain. One of my students in my winter session class, we had a big debate about whether taking Adderall to be successful in school makes you successful in life. That's a good debate. Because what if you Adderall up and finish med school? Okay, so Adderall, if you don't know, it's an amphetamine that you can take. It's a pretty low dose amphetamine, but it allows you to concentrate. So you could sit and focus and concentrate all afternoon while studying. And then how do you do in the test if you can study all afternoon? Presumably better, right? And if you look at someone who has attention deficit disorder, the Adderall brings them up to normal. Versus you take someone who's normal and give them amphetamines, they become better than normal. So amphetamines make you better than normal humans. Well, sort of. You get to keep what you learned. Well, that's interesting because what if you have to write a paper and you take an Adderall and you stay up all night working on the paper and you're concentrating on the paper and it comes out and you do really well on the paper? What do you learn? Going back to behavioral school psychology, what do you learn? that if I can wait till the last minute and add it all up and finish my paper. Does life work that way? School works that way. Well, yeah, but okay. So when we talk about sustainable harvesting, yeah. So again, talking about the brain, we can start looking at the effects of. We will talk about the effects of Adderall and amphetamines on attention and memory. They change attention. They change memory. What about nicotine? I pick on poor Alec, but one of my students was smoking his Juul in class. Like, it's a flash drive. Why are you sucking on it, moron? He's a wonderful kid. He's super nice. But why use it nicotine? It's a stimulant, and it actually makes you pay attention and remember more. What happens when you withdraw from nicotine? You get less attention and can't remember crap. Yeah, well, depending on the level of how far you've gone down the dependency. Yeah, because we used to, at a research lab I used to work at, Mike Lafitte was one of the professors that worked there. He was never taught. He was just a research guy. But he was like, he would chain smoke. Finish smoking a cigarette, light the next one. At home, he actually bought a hookah pipe. And he would just, he'd buy the cigarette tobacco in these big tins and just keep smoking the cigarette tobacco in the hookah pipe pretty much all the time. It's amazing he's still alive. Anyway, but whenever we had meetings, the professor would make the meeting go just long enough for him to start going into withdrawals. About 15 or 20 minutes, you'd see him getting all nervous and edgy and looking all over the place and doodling all over the place, and the professor that was running the meeting thought that was the hilarious thing ever. And Mike ran outside to go have a cigarette. But again, if you say, well, I really want to do counseling, do you need to know the brain? Yeah, because a lot of the problems that people have, they're not fixed by giving medicine, but by understanding how medicines work, you can definitely help people who are in serious crisis. If you're reading a research paper and they mention something about the brain, if you have no clue about it, it's really hard to read that paper. But one of my students from last year was telling me, oh, I saw something and they were talking about the brain and they didn't say it right. And it's like, really? Like, yeah, they were talking about this and that's not how it works. Like, see, you know more than the news channels know about the brain by the end of this class. And we're just skipping on the surface of it. Let's see. Why else should you care about the brain? We got drugs, check. What else? Just drugs? What about sleep? Sleep important for you? How do you know?
Because you die if you don't do it.
Yeah. So it turns out that your brain needs to sleep. Sleep is a homeostatic process. You have to go through a good night's sleep. What if you don't get a good night's sleep? Well, your brain doesn't work as well. Yeah, it'd be nice if we had a little battery meter, but we actually technically do have a battery meter. It's this, right? Wait. That means you're red. So if you're sitting in class like right now, it's kind of boring, and you're falling asleep. I had a student this morning falling asleep in 8 o'clock class. Why is he falling asleep? His brain has not had enough cycles to maintain consciousness. And because his brain had not had enough cycles to maintain consciousness, he is going to be asleep. Even if he's awake and paying attention, what happens? He's not going to process as much information because there's too much of chemical adenosine floating around in his brain. And what's great is that a lot of people don't want to talk about the brain, but the brain is involved with everything that we do. Hunger, thirst. We're going to go through all of those things and sexual drive, all with the hypothalamus. They all influence you. Sleep, body temperature, all influence by one little part of your brain control all of those things. If we tweak that little part of your brain, does that change the way you behave? So it's really cool. What about consciousness alone, man? What is consciousness? So if I anesthetize a part of your brain, I'm not allowed to do that, but if I did, what happens to your consciousness?
It's like numb, right?
Well, I can alter your consciousness by selectively numbing parts of your brain. We can't do that because it's dangerous and whatever. I'm not trained. There's a test called the WADA test where they inject amyl nitrate into your, which is a fast-acting anesthetic, into your carotid artery. And they do it on one side, they can anesthetize one whole side of your brain. They usually do it for epilepsy surgery and stuff, not for like cool, just having fun doing it. But they can look at the literal differences between the left and right side of your brain by anesthetizing one side or the other side. We'll show you a brain video where they're actually stimulating a guy's brain while he's awake and he's talking. So by the end of this class, I really don't care if you like the brain. But what's going to happen is I want you to hear brain differently than you think about it before we start this class. So what do you have to do before next class? Minimum. Yeah, download the vocab. Okay, because we're going to go through all the parts of a cell next class, all the basic biology. The only really stuff from the first class is this idea that psychology is the study of the mind, and that, where are we? Are we monists or dualists in this class? We're monists. We believe that the mind and the brain is the same. Whether I believe that or not is completely irrelevant, but it's the way that the class's perspective is. Okay? Normally, I have a class at 8 to 9:15 right before this class down in the B building. And so if I'm not going to be here for whatever reason, I will send an email. So if I have a student or somebody just talking to me or a student in crisis or something, I might be a minute or so late. It doesn't usually happen, but it can. Just so unless I email you, I will be here. Okay, so it's stop, and this is what's cool.